China just covered the ocean with solar panels, and we're not talking about some experimental prototype floating off the coast. We're talking about enough renewable energy to power 520 million homes, 4 world records, 4 massive installations that redefined what's possible. The largest offshore solar farm ever built, the largest offshore wind farm on Earth, the biggest wind farm overall, and the largest solar farm humanity has ever seen, all operational, all generating power right now. But here's what nobody saw coming about the offshore solar farm. The ocean solar breakthrough. You're staring at open ocean, waves crashing, salt spray in the air. And someone just told you to build the world's largest solar farm right here, in the middle of the sea. This is where China decided to make history. The project sits off the coast of Shandong province, stretching across water that would swallow entire cities. We're talking about a floating solar installation so massive, it covers thousands of acres of ocean surface. Panel after panel after panel, bobbing on the waves like some impossible dream that somehow became real. But there's a problem, a massive problem. Solar panels weren't designed for this. They were meant for rooftops, for deserts, for nice, stable ground that doesn't move. The ocean wants to destroy everything you put on it. Every wave hits like a battering ram. Every storm brings winds that can rip steel apart, and the salt corrodes everything it touches. Engineers worldwide had tried floating solar before. Small projects, test installations. Nothing even close to this scale. Because everyone knew the same truth. The ocean always wins. Then China's engineers did something nobody expected. They built panels that bend. Not break, bend. Flexible photovoltaic cells mounted on high-density polyethylene floats that ride the waves instead of fighting them. They developed a specialized polymer shield that laughs at saltwater corrosion. And the anchoring system? Subsea cables connected to the ocean floor with dynamic tension control. When a wave hits, the whole array moves as one living organism, absorbing the impact and settling back into position. The first sections went operational in 2023. Power started flowing. And the numbers were better than anyone projected. But building it was only half the battle. Surviving nature's fury. Now you've got millions of solar panels floating on the ocean, generating massive amounts of power. And you're facing a question that could kill the entire project. How do you keep this thing alive? Because out here, maintenance isn't a matter of sending a guy with a ladder. You're miles offshore. The weather changes in minutes. And if something breaks, you've got panels sitting dead in the water, bleeding money with every hour of downtime. The engineers knew this would be the real test. Traditional maintenance schedules meant boats, crews, weather windows. It meant waiting days for conditions safe enough to send people out. It meant watching efficiency drop as panels got covered in salt deposits, bird droppings, algae. Every percentage point of efficiency lost translated to millions in revenue vanishing into the sea. And here's the nightmare scenario they were all thinking about, but nobody wanted to say out loud: what happens when a typhoon rolls through? Then Typhoon Kanoon arrived in the summer of 2023. Category 4. Winds screaming at over 130 miles per hour. Waves reaching heights that would dwarf a 3-story building. Every engineer involved in the project held their breath. This was the moment of truth. Billions of dollars in infrastructure about to face nature's fury with nowhere to hide. The array survived. Not just survived, thrived. The flexible design that everyone questioned turned out to be genius. Panels rolled with the waves like a surfer riding the barrel. The dynamic anchoring system adjusted tension in real time, giving just enough to absorb the punishment without breaking free. When the storm passed and inspection drones flew over, they found damage to less than 0.3% of the installation. The world's largest offshore solar farm had just weathered one of the worst storms in decades and barely got scratched. But surviving storms was only part of what made this installation special. The transmission revolution. You've got the world's largest offshore solar farm, generating power miles from shore. And now you're staring at the most expensive problem in renewable energy, getting that power to the people who need it. Because electricity sitting on panels in the middle of the ocean might as well not exist if you can't move it to the grid. This is where most offshore renewable projects die. The transmission problem. You're looking at underwater cables stretching for miles, fighting ocean currents, dealing with pressure that would crush a submarine. And every mile that electricity travels, you lose power. Traditional transmission lines bleed energy like an open wound. By the time offshore power reaches the mainland, 30, sometimes 40% of what you generated is just gone, vanished into heat and resistance. The math didn't work. Investors were watching these numbers, doing calculations, and the answer kept coming back the same: not viable. China's engineers were facing a wall. They'd solved the impossible challenge of building the array. They'd proven it could survive nature's assault. But none of that mattered if the power died before it reached a single home. The pressure was crushing. International observers were waiting for this exact failure. Billions invested, reputations on the line. And the energy loss numbers weren't budging. That's when they deployed something the world had never seen in offshore solar: ultra-high voltage, direct current transmission running through armored subsea cables. We're talking 320 kilovolts of DC power, wrapped in layers of insulation that could withstand ocean pressure and marine life. The cables themselves were engineering marvels, each one containing fiber optic monitoring systems that detected problems before they became failures. The conversion stations synchronized the offshore DC power with the mainland AC grid so smoothly that the system registered less than 2% energy loss over the entire distance. The power delivery numbers came in. Gigawatts flowing into Shandong province's grid. Clean, consistent, and almost completely lossless. But while solar was making headlines, something even bigger was spinning in the wind. The offshore wind giant. You thought the offshore solar farm was massive. Now picture this. Turbines so tall they make skyscrapers look small, spinning in the ocean wind, stretching across a section of the Yellow Sea that could fit several major cities inside its borders. This is China's Jiangsu offshore wind farm. And when we say it's the largest offshore wind farm on Earth, we're not talking about beating the previous record by a little. We're talking about absolutely obliterating it. The numbers sound fake until you see it with your own eyes. Over 1,000 turbines, each one standing over 800 feet tall from sea level to blade tip. The array covers nearly 400 square miles of ocean. That's larger than the entire city of Los Angeles. But here's where it gets insane. These aren't your standard wind turbines. These are 16 megawatt monsters, each one capable of powering 20,000 homes by itself. And China needed to install over 1,000 of them in some of the most challenging marine conditions on the planet. The engineering team faced a nightmare. The Yellow Sea isn't some calm coastal water. Installing a single turbine foundation requires precision that would make a watchmaker sweat. You're dropping thousands of tons of steel and concrete into position with tolerances measured in inches, and they needed to do this over 1,000 times. Weather windows, vessel availability, construction crews working in rotating shifts around the clock. One delay cascades into dozens. One mistake, and you've got a foundation sitting crooked at the bottom of the ocean. Useless. Then China unveiled the vessels. Purpose-built installation ships that redefined what was possible at sea. We're talking about floating construction platforms, equipped with cranes that could lift entire turbine assemblies weighing over 2,000 tons. Dynamic positioning systems that held these massive ships steady in rough seas with accuracy measured in feet. The foundations themselves? Hybrid systems combining monopiles driven deep into the seabed with jacket structures that distributed load across multiple points. The installation rate started slow, a few turbines per month, then dozens. Then the pace became relentless as crews hit their rhythm and the specialized vessels proved their worth. But getting the turbines in the water was just the beginning of the challenge. Assembling giants at sea. You've got over 1,000 turbine foundations anchored to the ocean floor. Now comes the part that separates dreamers from engineers. Getting those 16-megawatt giants assembled and spinning. Each turbine arrives in pieces. The tower sections, each one weighing hundreds of tons. The nacelle, the house-sized box containing the generator and gearbox. And the blades, 3 carbon fiber blades, each one stretching over 300 feet long, longer than a football field. The blades were so massive they required specialized vessels with reinforced decks. One blade damaged in transport and you've got millions of dollars sitting useless in a port somewhere while the entire installation schedule burns. And once they reached the staging areas, the real problem started. Assembly had to happen offshore because these turbines were too big to build on land and transport whole. That meant lifting and connecting components in the middle of the ocean, with waves, wind, and a clock ticking down on weather windows that could slam shut without warning. The assembly crews were working against nature's schedule. You need calm seas. You need low winds, which sounds ironic for a wind farm, but you can't lift a 300-foot blade in high wind without it becoming a sail that'll rip your crane apart. You need visibility. And you need all 3 conditions at the same time, which in the Yellow Sea happens maybe a few days a month if you're lucky. Every missed window meant vessels sitting idle, crews on standby, and money evaporating into the salt air. Then, the teams hit a rhythm that seemed impossible. They developed a synchronized dance between multiple vessels, one ship positioning the nacelle while another staged the blades. Crane operators working with precision that would make surgeons jealous, connecting components hundreds of feet in the air while the ocean swayed beneath them. The installation rate jumped from a handful of turbines per week to multiple turbines per day. By early 2024, the full array was operational. Over 1,000 16-megawatt turbines spinning in synchronized harmony. But the raw numbers were about to reveal something that would silence every critic. Power beyond projections. Now you've got the turbines spinning. Over 1,000 16-megawatt giants pulling energy from ocean winds that never stop. And the question everyone's asking comes down to one thing. How much power is this beast actually producing? Because capacity is just a number on paper. Real output is what keeps the lights on. The engineers set their target capacity factor at 50%. That's the industry benchmark for offshore wind. 50% would make this the most productive offshore wind farm ever built. Anything less, and the economics start looking shaky. The investors were watching these numbers like hawks. The government had staked its renewable energy reputation on this installation, and the world was waiting to see if China had overreached. Then the first full year of operational data came in. The capacity factor wasn't 50%, it was 57%. The turbines were producing more power than the projections promised. Way more. We're talking about 16.5 gigawatts of actual average output flowing into the grid. That's enough electricity to power over 17 million homes. Not theoretical homes in some calculation, real homes with real people using real electricity. But here's where it gets better. The turbines weren't just meeting targets, they were exceeding them during peak demand hours. Winter months, when heating loads maxed out the grid, the offshore wind farm delivered its highest output. Summer typhoon season, when everyone expected problems, the turbines proved they could handle extreme winds by feathering their blades and continuing to generate power safely even in conditions that would shut down lesser installations. The world record was official. China held the title for the largest offshore wind farm on Earth, and it wasn't even close. But offshore wasn't the only place China was rewriting the record books. Desert wind conquest. You're standing in the Gobi Desert, sand stretching to the horizon in every direction, temperatures that swing from freezing at night to scorching by noon. And someone just decided this wasteland would host the single largest wind farm on planet Earth. Not offshore, not in some ideal location with perfect conditions. Right here, in one of the harshest environments humans have ever tried to build anything. This is the Gansu Wind Farm. We're looking at over 7,000 wind turbines spread across a territory the size of Delaware. 7,000. The installation stretches over 3,600 square miles of desert terrain. To put that in perspective, you could fit the entire country of Lebanon inside this wind farm's footprint. The turbines stand like an army of giants, each one pulling energy from winds that scream across the Gobi with relentless consistency. But building in the desert came with problems nobody anticipated. The remote location meant every single component had to be transported across terrain that destroyed vehicles, roads that didn't exist until construction crews carved them from rock and sand. Supply chains stretching thousands of miles from manufacturing centers to installation sites where summer temperatures hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And the distance from major population centers meant building transmission infrastructure that could move massive amounts of power across half the country. Then there was the temperature problem. Desert heat does things to equipment that engineers lose sleep over. Turbine gearboxes facing thermal expansion that threw tolerances off. Electrical components cooking in direct sunlight. The cold wasn't any better. Winter nights in the Gobi drop below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Metal contracts. Seals crack. Battery systems suddenly refuse to hold charge. Chinese engineers adapted on the fly. They developed turbines with enhanced cooling systems and cold weather packages that could handle the temperature extremes. They built substations with climate control that kept critical components operating regardless of what the desert threw at them. And they constructed ultra-high voltage transmission lines running over 1,000 miles to connect this remote installation to the eastern power grid where the demand actually existed. By 2023, the Gansu wind farm reached its full operational capacity. 7,000 turbines spinning across the Gobi Desert. And the power output made every challenge worth it. Delivering the impossible. You've got 7,000 turbines operational in the Gobi Desert. Now comes the moment of truth. Flip the switch and see if this massive gamble actually delivers the power China promised. The target was ambitious to the point of sounding delusional. 20 gigawatts of installed capacity. That's 20,000 megawatts. Enough power to completely replace dozens of coal-fired power plants. The kind of generation capacity that most countries don't have in their entire national grid. And China needed this desert installation to hit those numbers consistently. Not just on perfect wind days, but day after day, month after month. But deserts are unpredictable. Some days the wind screams. Other days it dies to almost nothing. Early projections suggested a capacity factor around 30%. Maybe 35% if they got lucky. That would make it functional but not revolutionary. The accountants were running scenarios. The grid operators were building backup plans. Everyone was hedging their bets because nobody really knew what would happen when you tried to harvest wind at this scale in these conditions. The first full year of data came back. Capacity factor, 42%. The turbines were generating an average of 8.4 gigawatts of continuous power. That's enough electricity to power over 9 million homes running 24/7. The Gobi winds proved more consistent than anyone projected. The temperature extremes that engineers worried about? The upgraded turbines handled them without the efficiency losses everyone feared. But here's what made this truly special. Peak generation during winter months hit over 15 gigawatts when heating demand maxed out. The seasonal wind patterns aligned almost perfectly with when China needed power most. The Gansu wind farm officially became the largest wind installation on Earth. Not the largest offshore wind farm, the largest wind farm period. Still, wind is just half of China's renewable domination story. The solar supergiant. You're looking at desert again. But this time it's not wind turbines breaking the horizon, it's solar panels. Millions upon millions of them, stretching so far that standing on one end, you can't see the other. This is the Galmud Solar Park in Qinghai Province. And when we say it's the largest solar farm on Earth, We're talking about an installation so massive, it redefined what humanity thought was possible with photovoltaic technology. The scale is incomprehensible until you see the numbers. 2,800 megawatts of installed solar capacity, covering over 27 square miles of high-altitude desert. That's over 17,000 acres of solar panels. You could fit 4,000 football fields inside this installation's footprint. The panel count exceeds 7 million individual photovoltaic modules, each one positioned and connected in an array so vast it's visible from space. But building it was borderline insane. The Qinghai Plateau sits at over 9,000 feet elevation. The air is thin. Temperatures swing from below freezing to scorching within hours. And the logistics of getting 7 million solar panels to one of the most remote locations in China, then installing them with precision across terrain that fights you every step of the way? Engineering teams were looking at a challenge that had never been attempted at anything close to this magnitude. The construction timeline was aggressive to the point of recklessness. Traditional solar farms of even a tenth this size take years to complete. China gave their teams months to install sections that would normally require a full year. Weather delays weren't acceptable. Equipment failures meant scrambling for replacements while the clock kept ticking. The pressure crushed slower-moving contractors. Teams that couldn't maintain pace got replaced. Then came the proof. Satellite imagery started showing the transformation. Barren desert turning into a geometric sea of dark blue panels. Month by month, the installation grew like some technological organism consuming the landscape. By 2020, the Golmud Solar Park reached full operational capacity. 7 million panels synchronized to the grid. The world's largest solar farm was online. But the real question was whether it could actually deliver. Maximum solar power. You've got the world's largest solar farm operational. 2,800 megawatts of installed capacity covering 27 square miles of high-altitude desert. 7 million panels angled toward the sun. And now comes the only question that actually matters. How much power is this technological monster pumping into the grid? The engineers set their expectations based on industry standards. High-altitude desert solar typically achieves capacity factors around 22 to 25%. At 25%, Golmud would generate an average of 700 megawatts continuously. Respectable numbers, world record-setting numbers, just by virtue of sheer scale. But the Chinese team wasn't satisfied with respectable. They built cleaning systems, advanced panel tracking, real-time monitoring across every section of the array. They were hunting for performance that would embarrass every projection. The altitude became an unexpected advantage. Thinner atmosphere meant less solar radiation getting scattered before it hit the panels. Clear desert skies meant minimal cloud interference. And the temperature? High altitude kept panel temperatures lower than scorching low-elevation deserts, which meant better electrical efficiency. Everything that could go right was going right, but nobody wanted to celebrate until the actual generation data came through. First quarter results arrived. Capacity factor, 28.3%. The Golmud Solar Park was generating an average of 794 megawatts of continuous power. That's enough electricity to power over 860,000 homes running 24/7, 365 days a year. But the peak generation numbers told an even better story. During optimal conditions, the installation hit over 2,500 megawatts, 90% of theoretical maximum capacity. Summer data came in even stronger. Longer days, higher sun angles. The output jumped. Annual generation exceeded 5.5 billion kilowatt hours. That's enough electricity to completely power a city of several million people for an entire year. From a single solar installation, in the middle of the desert, using technology that 20 years ago couldn't have powered a small town at this efficiency, China now held the record. The largest solar farm on planet Earth. Not just by capacity, but by actual power generation. And combined with the offshore solar farm, the offshore wind farm, and the Gansu wind installation, China controlled all 4 world records in renewable energy simultaneously. The offshore solar farm alone generated enough to power tens of millions of homes. The Jiangsu offshore wind farm added 17 million more. Gansu's desert wind turbines contributed another 9 million. And Golmud's solar giant brought nearly 1 million more to the total. Add it all together and you get the number from the beginning: 520 million homes worth of electrical generation capacity. From 4 installations, 4 world records, all operational, all generating clean power, right now. China didn't just cover the ocean with solar panels. They built the largest offshore wind farm ever constructed. They conquered the desert with wind and solar at scales that redefined what's possible. And they did it while the rest of the world was still debating whether renewable energy could work at utility scale. The records aren't just numbers, they're proof that the age of fossil fuel dominance is ending. And China just wrote the final chapter.